Welcome back to the podcast de Philippe, everyone. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below on YouTube so we can finally break 1,000 subscribers today. All right, getting right into it. In this deep dive today, we're going to be looking at some articles about Google's new Gemini AI and more specifically, how it's going to completely change how we use our smartphones to communicate.
I think it's particularly interesting how Gemini is using its advanced language model to directly connect with all the main communication apps you'd find on Android.
Like, when you say connect directly, can you give us some examples of how that works? I know the articles mentioned extensions, but I'm not totally clear on how that works exactly.
Yeah, so these extensions are essentially like bridges between Gemini and all the apps on your phone. Like, for example, say you wanted to send a WhatsApp message to your mom saying you'll be home late.
Okay.
Gemini would be able to understand that request, open WhatsApp, find your mom in your contacts, write out the message, and then all you have to do is confirm that you want to send it.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
It really is.
So how is all this different from using Google Assistant? Like, Assistant already lets you send texts and make calls with just your voice, right?
You're right, but Assistant can really only respond to like a very specific set of pre-programmed commands, whereas Gemini can actually understand and respond to all the nuances of how we naturally talk.
So it's less about memorizing specific phrases and more about just like talking to your phone like you'd talk to a person.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to get it now. So what are some other things Gemini can do that are completely different from what we can do with Assistant today?
So like think about searching through your emails. With Assistant, you can only search by keywords, but with Gemini, you could actually just describe what you're looking for using natural language, and it would still be able to find the right email.
So you wouldn't have to remember the exact subject line or the sender or anything like that?
Nope, it can actually understand the meaning and the context of what you're looking for, not just match keywords.
That's amazing. It really sounds like the future of how we interact with technology. It's pretty crazy.
It really is a huge step forward.
So to be clear, is Gemini basically just like a smarter version of Assistant? Or is it something totally different?
It's definitely a much bigger change than just a simple upgrade. I think Assistant is great for simple tasks, but Gemini is really meant to be like the main hub for how we use our devices in the future.
And all this is happening on Android right now, right? What about iPhone users? Is Apple working on anything similar?
Well, as far as I know, Google hasn't said anything about bringing Gemini to iOS anytime soon, but Apple is developing their own new AI system, which is supposedly codenamed Apple Intelligence.
Oh, wow. Apple Intelligence. That sounds pretty intense.
Huh?
What do we know about it so far? How does it stack up against Gemini?
Well, based on what's been leaked so far, it looks like Apple is really focusing on personalization and context awareness. Basically, Apple Intelligence will try to learn your preferences and your habits and even like what's on your screen at any given time to be able to give you assistance that's tailored specifically for you.
So it sounds like Google and Apple are taking slightly different approaches, but they're both really pushing the boundaries of what AI assistants can do.
For sure. And I think that kind of competition is always a good thing because it forces both companies to constantly innovate and come up with even better technology.
I totally agree. So all this is great, but it makes me wonder about the future of traditional ways of using our smartphones, like making calls and sending texts. Like, is all that just going to go away?
That's a really good question. I think it's definitely too early to tell for sure whether these new AI assistants will totally replace traditional ways of communicating.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge shift in how we interact with our phones.
Yeah.
But what's it like actually using Gemini? Have you had a chance to try it out yet?
Oh, yeah, I've been playing around with it, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
There are definitely still some kinks to work out, though.
Oh, really? Like
Oh,
what's up?
well, like one thing is, for example, when you're sending a text with Gemini, you have to vocally confirm that you want to send it. I'm not quite used to that yet, so sometimes I'll accidentally switch back to the screen and just press the send button manually.
Oh, I see. So it's not completely hands-free yet.
Yeah, exactly. There are still some parts of the experience that feel a little clunky, but I think it has huge potential. And there are already some parts of it that are just incredible.
Like what?
Well, like I was saying earlier about how Gemini can understand natural language, that applies to searching for emails too. It's amazing to be able to just describe what I'm looking for and have Gemini actually find the right email.
Wow. That is a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Like, that really shows the power of its language model. It's really understanding what you mean, not just matching keywords like we're used to.
I know, it's pretty mind-blowing. It really gives you a glimpse of what the future of interacting with information could look like.
For sure. Okay, so we've talked a lot about what Gemini can do and how it compares to other AI assistants, but there's still so much more to cover. Like what other functionalities are in development? And what does this all mean for the future of how we interact with our devices in general?
And before we get into all that, I think it's important to address some of the practical considerations of using Gemini. Like, is it actually more convenient than traditional methods, or are there limitations that we should be aware of?
So we were just talking about the potential downsides of using Gemini. It sounds like there's a pretty big gap between how amazing it sounds in theory and what it's like to actually use it.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. As groundbreaking as the technology is, there are definitely some real-world limitations that we need to be aware of.
Okay, so like what kind of limitations are we talking about?
Well, for one thing, like, if you're in a noisy environment, it can be pretty hard to use voice commands reliably, and the accuracy of Gemini's responses can really vary a lot depending on how complex your request is.
So it's not always going to be the perfect futuristic experience that we might imagine.
Not quite yet, at least. But it's important to remember that this is all still very new technology. As more people start using Gemini and giving feedback, the AI will continue to learn and improve.
Right, it's like a constant process of refining the technology.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about how Gemini is being used for more than just communication. I know the articles you sent also talked about some other really interesting functionalities.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Google is already hard at work expanding what Gemini can do beyond just calls and texts and emails and all of that. Like, for example, they're working on a Google Home extension that will let you control all your smart home devices through Gemini.
Oh, wow. So you could control your lights and your thermostat and everything all through Gemini. That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of having to use a bunch of different apps or remember a bunch of different voice commands, you'll be able to control your entire smart home through one single interface.
That's a really compelling vision of the future. What other features are they working on?
Well, there's also a utilities extension that's in development that will apparently let you manage a lot of your phone's settings with just your voice. Like, you'll be able to turn on Do Not Disturb mode, adjust the screen brightness, even take screenshots.
All without ever having to touch your phone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The idea is to make Gemini the main way that we interact with our devices.
So instead of constantly tapping and swiping, we'll just be talking to our phone.
It seems like that's the direction things are heading in. And by putting all that functionality into one interface, Gemini could really simplify how we manage our digital lives.
That makes sense. But all this makes me wonder about Google's motives. Like, are they just trying to make our lives easier? Or is there something more to it?
I think that's a really important question to ask. Because by making Gemini the central hub for our digital lives, Google is gaining access to a ton of data about us, our preferences, our habits, even our conversations. And they can use all that data to personalize their services, target advertising, even potentially influence our behavior.
So even though it's really convenient and appealing to have this seamless integrated experience, we have to be careful about what we're giving up in terms of our privacy.
Absolutely. We all need to be aware of how our data is being used and make informed decisions about the technology we use.
Okay, so we've talked about the benefits and the drawbacks of using AI. But what about the philosophical implications? Like, as we get more and more used to relying on AI assistants like Gemini, what does that mean for us as humans?
That's a huge question and one that deserves a lot of careful consideration. On the one hand, AI assistants can really free up our mental bandwidth, allowing us to focus on more creative and fulfilling tasks.
It's like having a personal assistant who takes care of all the boring everyday stuff so that you can focus on the things that really matter.
Yeah, exactly. But there's also a risk that we could become overly reliant on AI, and that could lead to us losing some of our critical thinking skills and our ability to solve problems on our own.
So it's about finding the right balance between using AI to make our lives better and maintaining our own independence.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about creating a synergy between human intelligence and artificial intelligence, using AI as a tool to help us reach our full potential, not as a replacement for our own abilities.
That's a really great way to put it. This whole discussion's been incredibly eye-opening.
It really has.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into Google's Gemini, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all this?
I think the most important takeaway is that AI is an incredibly powerful tool, but it's not a magic solution to all our problems. It's really important that we approach this technology thoughtfully and critically, considering both the potential benefits and the potential downsides.
So we have to be responsible with this technology and make sure that we're using it in a way that benefits everyone.
Exactly. We need to make sure that we're shaping the development and deployment of AI in a way that serves humanity's best interests.
I couldn't agree more. This has been a really fascinating look at Google's Gemini and all the ways it's changing how we interact with technology. But we're not done yet. In our final segment, we'll delve into the ethical considerations surrounding AI and explore what the future holds for this transformative technology. Don't forget to subscribe to Le Podcast de Philippe on YouTube so we can hit that 1,000 subscriber goal today. Welcome back to Le Podcast de Philippe. We spent this deep dive exploring Google's Gemini and how it's going to impact how we communicate and really just how we live our digital lives in general.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground already, the potential benefits, some of the challenges, and some of the practical things to keep in mind when using it.
Definitely. But now I want to shift gears a bit and talk about some of the bigger picture stuff. Like we've talked about AI as a tool, but what are some of the ethical things we should be thinking about as this technology keeps developing?
That's a really important question, and I think one of the biggest concerns is data privacy. As these AI assistants like Gemini become more and more a part of our lives, they're collecting tons of information about us, our behaviors, our preferences, even our conversations.
It's definitely convenient to have an assistant that can anticipate your needs, but it makes you wonder what you're giving up in terms of privacy. Like, how can we be sure that all that data is being used responsibly?
Well, that's a challenge that developers and policymakers are really struggling with right now. I think the most important thing is transparency. Users need to know exactly what data is being collected, how it's being used, and what control they have over it.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing to think about is the potential for bias in these AI systems. Since they're trained on huge data sets, if those data sets reflect existing societal biases, the AI might just end up amplifying those biases.
You're exactly right. It's a really tough problem to solve. It requires a lot of care and attention to the data that's used to train these AI models, as well as constant monitoring and adjustments to the algorithms themselves.
Definitely. And then there's the potential impact on human connection. As we get more used to talking to AI assistants, could that change how we interact with each other?
It's a fascinating question, isn't it? I've heard some people argue that AI could actually make human connections stronger by breaking down language barriers and making it easier for people from different cultures to communicate.
Oh, that's interesting. So you could actually bring people closer together rather than pushing them apart.
Exactly. But of course, there's always the other side of the coin. If we start relying too much on AI assistance, could that lead to less genuine human interaction?
Right. There's a balance to be struck. We need to be aware of both the good and the bad.
Absolutely. The future of AI isn't set in stone. It's shaped by the decisions we make today. So we all have a responsibility as users, developers, and policymakers to make sure that this technology is developed and used in a way that benefits all of humanity.
Well said. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Google's Gemini, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. AI is an incredibly powerful tool that has the potential to change our world in profound ways. It's up to us to make sure that we use it wisely, ethically, and for the good of everyone. Thanks for joining us on Le Podcast de Philippe.